I will invite you once again to put something in the box in the foyer if you have any suggestions for this series. We've been doing it the whole year so far. Got a few left in mind, but if you have one, you've thought of one, let me know somehow. We'll keep going. Apathy is not one that somebody suggested, at least not by that name, that word, but it was one of the things that were suggested in a way, just by another name. Some people may not know what apathy is. What is apathy? According to the dictionary, apathy is the lack of interest or concern. Another word we might use is indifference or disinterest. Complacency, that was what was actually suggested. Or maybe lukewarmness, which is more of a strictly Bible word. Lukewarm. Apathy, this is what that is. Our question has been, what does the Bible teach about apathy? What does the Bible teach about this concept of indifference or complacency? Lack of interest or concern. Is that something the Bible talks about? Well, actually it does, quite a bit. In fact, if you take all the admonitions and words of encouragement as far as being faithful, every one of those speaks to this concept of a lack of concern. There are some things in life that we are apathetic about, not really concerned. Some things that you might be concerned about, you may know somebody who's not really concerned about it, and maybe to the point that you can't even imagine how somebody could not be concerned about it. But you know the look, you know the way it is. Doesn't bother me. Not worried about it. That's apathy. Unbothered, uninterested, I'm not concerned about it, and it manifests itself in basically nothing. You do nothing. The reason I'm not doing anything about this is because I'm not worried about it. I'm not concerned. I'm not interested in that. It's nothing to me. What does the Bible teach about that concept when it comes to spiritual matters, when it comes to the church, when it comes to the Christian life? Few things. Number one, the Bible teaches that apathy is disgraceful. In general. There is another concept that is talked about a lot, especially in the book of Proverbs. In Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 9, the Proverbs writer mentions a certain hypothetical character, if you will. One of his favorites is the fool. The Proverbs writer has a lot to say about the fool. In fact, you could almost say everything that he says is about the fool, or the opposite of the fool. Including this other. One of his other favorites is the sluggard. The sluggard is a fool, okay? So technically he's a fool, but he calls him sluggard. Great word. Because it says what it is, basically. Somebody who, think about a slug. Just sits around, doesn't get in a hurry. You ever seen a slug in a hurry? No, you haven't. Don't even pretend like you have, because you haven't. I've seen them get places. I've never seen them get to the place. I just see that they got to the place. I don't know how they did it, but because you could watch them all night and they won't move. Somebody that's like that is a sluggard, is what the Proverbs writer calls a sluggard. And in chapter 6, the Proverbs writer says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. She doesn't have a chief, an overseer, or a ruler, and yet she provides her bread in the summer. She garnishes her food in the harvest. How long will you sleep, O sluggard? When will you rise out of your sleep, out of your slumber? How long will you lie there, you sluggard? See, the whole implication is that it's disgraceful. It's a disgrace to be like that. How long are you going to lie there? All you do, you lay in bed all day, every day. How long? Of course, he's not meaning literally, but what about spiritually? Spiritually, we may lie in bed all day, every day. Can't get bothered to move. And if we do move, we're not in a hurry. There's no drive about us. He says you need to take a lesson from the ant, one of the smallest creatures that we might see on a regular basis, is better than the sluggard. It's a disgrace. What is a sluggard? One scholar says it's a useless, lazy person. They are useless, lazy persons who always fail because of laziness that becomes moral failure. Their souls want nothing and they get nothing. These persons take no initiative. They don't do their tasks on time. They will not work. And they create imaginary excuses, which the Proverbs writer also addresses. We'll see in just a minute. So the taunting rhetorical question is really designed to shame this hypothetical sluggard because it's an embarrassment. It's a disgrace. In chapter 19, verse 24, he says, the sluggard buries his hand in the dish and will not even bring it back to his mouth. Isn't that the most pathetic thing you could imagine? How can it get that bad? I picture it with a big jar of M&Ms. I don't know why, but that's what I have in my mind. Because my hand is probably going to go in there eventually if it's there. But I can't imagine it being so bad that I get my hand in there and then I think, you know what? Can't do it. Too much. Not worth it. So there it is, just sitting there. I'm such a sluggard, I won't even bring my hand out of the dish to get the delicious M&Ms or whatever it is. That picture is meant to be ridiculous because that's how he feels about the sluggard. It's a disgrace. It's a shame. In chapter 26, verse 13, the sluggard says, there's a lion in the road. There's a lion in the streets. Seems random, doesn't it? Well, unless we understand the context, the sluggard says that. So it's just made up. It's an excuse. Lying around all day in bed, your mom says, get up and go do something. Go to get a job or go to work. I can't go to work. There's monsters out there. That's the same thing. There are lions out there in the street. There's a lion sitting out on the porch. Can't go out there. Now, you'd probably take that person to a facility because something's clearly not right. Or maybe they're just making it up because they don't want to go. They don't want to get up. They don't want to move. That's the sluggard. That is a manifestation of apathy. Can't be bothered. And it's disgraceful. The Scriptures depict it as a total disgrace. Such a person is a total disgrace to themselves, to anyone that they may represent, and even to those connected to them. So the Bible indicates that apathy is disgraceful. Number two, the Bible teaches that apathy is destructive. It's not just disgraceful. It's actually destructive. It's dangerous. It's destructive. It's, first of all, destructive to yourself. Apathy is destructive to oneself. Again, Proverbs 6, the verses 10 and 11. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, he says, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. See, apathy is actually destructive. You just keep on being that way, and all of a sudden, poverty comes on you. Just like that. before you even realize. It's destructive. It's dangerous. Proverbs 13:4, the soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. There we see the alternative to being a sluggard or being apathetic is diligence. But the sluggard, the person, the apathetic person, the indifferent person, craves and gets nothing. Proverbs 15:19, the way of a sluggard is like a hedge of thorns. Dangerous, destructive. Proverbs 20, verse 4, the sluggard does not plow in the autumn, he'll seek at harvest and have nothing. It's self-destructive. Proverbs 21:25, the desire of the sluggard kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. Apathy is destructive. It's not only destructive to the person himself, it's destructive actually to others. The Bible teaches that apathy can be destructive, is destructive to other people. Your apathy is destructive to other people. Ecclesiastes 10:18 says, through sloth, same thing as, that's what the sluggard struggles with, is slothfulness. Through slothfulness, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. See, it's destructive. But by that analogy, it's not just you that's going to suffer the effects of that. It's whoever else is in that house. Other people will suffer. Or maybe the most powerful statement in this connection is Proverbs 18, verse 9. Listen to what the Proverbs writer says here. Whoever is slack in his work is a brother to him who destroys. Whoever is slack in his work, is lacking in his work, who is negligent in his work, who is not working, is a brother to him who destroys. Think about that. Inspired of the Holy Spirit. Because we would never equate those two things. The one who doesn't work as he should is a brother to the one who's destroying the thing. Think about a building, a house. One who is sitting around is a brother to one who is actively going around with a sledgehammer and knocking down what the people are trying to build. That's what he says. That's how destructive it is. Indifference. Sitting down, not helping, not working, can't be bothered. That's destructive. It's so destructive that it's just as destructive as the person who is actively going around and destroying. Indifference, apathy is destructive. It always manifests itself in slackness. That's how it manifests itself. You don't see someone's indifference. You see the effects of their indifference, which is always inaction, inactivity, slackness in work. It's not only destructive to the person himself, but also to the one for whose cause he's supposed to be working. And in the case of the Christian, that's the Lord. So if I am indifferent, if I am apathetic towards the church, the cause of Christ, the gospel, I am actually working to destroy the church, to destroy the cause of Christ, because the one who is slack in his work is a brother to him that destroys. So don't ever think that being an apathetic Christian or being indifferent, I don't really see one way or the other. I'm indifferent. I'm just here. Don't ever think that's harmless. Don't ever think that is a neutral There's no such thing as neutral with the Lord. Neutrality is the right way to go in many aspects of life, but not spirituality. There's no such thing as neutrality. Jesus said, you are either with me or against me. Period. If you don't gather with me, you're scattering. That's exactly what the Proverbs writer here is saying. The one who's slack in his work is a brother to the one who's going around destroying the work. Apathy is destructive. Number 3, the Bible teaches that apathy is damnable. It is actually, positively damnable. In other words, it has the power and ability to result in the damnation of a person. That's what Jesus told the church at Laodicea in Revelation 3, where we read from our scripture reading a second ago. You know, Laodicea is one of the congregations there that the Lord could not find a single thing to compliment. Couldn't find a single thing. And the Lord was good at finding things to compliment. Just look at Peter. Peter had a lot of things on the cons list. Maybe not so many on the pros list at first, but the Lord found them. But with Laodicea, he couldn't find a single thing. But here's what he told them. He told them that they were guilty of being lukewarm. And in case you didn't know what lukewarm means, he goes ahead and says, it's neither hot nor cold. We probably all know what lukewarm means. I couldn't tell you the history behind that English word and why that is the word, but we know what it means. It's right in the middle. It's not hot water. It's not cold water. It's just lukewarm, room temperature. That's the worst kind, isn't it? Nobody wants that. Sometimes we like cold water. Sometimes we use hot water. But very rarely does anybody want in between. It's not good for anything. Well, that's pretty much what he's telling them. You know, they're lukewarm. They're indifferent. They're disinterested. They're apathetic. Lukewarm. So the Lord told them that because of their lukewarmness, he would spit them out of his mouth. I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. Now, there is a reason he uses that kind of language based in, I guess, the history of that area and the concept of the lukewarm water as opposed to the hot or cold. But the meaning of the words is clear. They were no longer going to be connected with Jesus. I will vomit you out of my mouth. Just like God told the Israelites, I will vomit you out of this land if you turn from me. Jesus says, I'll vomit you out of my mouth. I'll spit you out of my mouth. In other words, when the Lord's people are plagued by apathy, they stop being the Lord's people. It's a damnable offense. What about Matthew 25, the parable of the talents? We talk about that one-talent servant. The one-talent servant, who was really a no-talent servant in the end, but he's the one-talent servant. And he was the one-talent servant because all he did was took the one talent and he buried it in the ground. And so that when the master returned, when he was supposed to be doing business, or what have you, he would give him the one back. Of course, he had all kinds of excuses. But what we could ask the question, what led the one-talent servant to do what he did? Well, if we take what he said, fear, cowardice, timidity, all those could be true. False reasoning, he had a little bit of that going in there too. Self-justification, could be any of those or all of them. But the real problem, the underlying problem, during the entire time that his master was away was this: he simply couldn't be bothered. I don't know how long he was gone. It's just a parable. Every detail is not incorporated into the parable. But the idea is he was gone for a considerable amount of time. I'm going away. Take this. Engage in business with it, and I'll come back and see what you've done. Could have been months. Day after day. He buried that talent in the ground. You know what? The next day, he could have thought about it and been like, you know what? I better go get that and do something. Didn't do it. Next day. He may have even seen the other servants. Look, I got 2 now, or 3, 4, 5. All that time, he just couldn't be bothered. I bet he had a lot of other things he was doing. But as far as that goes, he was never compelled to go and dig that talent up and do what his master told him to do. He could not be moved. He had no interest. He was unconcerned. He didn't have any regard for it. Had no regard for his master's cause and the command that he gave him. And the consequence of that apathy was damnation. At the end of the parable, he says, "You wicked and slothful servant." And then he says, "Cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." He took the talent. Thank you very much. Thanks, but no thanks. Give it to the other. Now he says, cast him into outer darkness. That's how serious. What did he do? Nothing. And yet, that's exactly it. He did nothing. He could have argued all day. I didn't encourage the others to not take theirs. I didn't try to get anybody else to do it. I didn't hamper anybody else's efforts. But he did, in a way. He could have. His apathy could have done that. Because remember, he that is slack in his work is a brother to him who destroys. He was working against his master. By doing nothing, he was working against his master. And he was punished. And that's supposed to be a spiritual lesson for us. When we do that in our spiritual lives, we've already been told the end result. Cast him into outer darkness. He's wicked. He's not just slothful, he's wicked. It's wicked to do that. It's evil. No, it's not wicked and evil. Killing people's wicked. Lying is evil. Stealing is wicked. Slothfulness is not wicked. The Lord says, yes, it is. Cast them into outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The only place that is ever described as the place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth is hell. Hebrews 6, verses 11 and 12, the Hebrews writer said, "We desire each one of you to show the same earnestness to have the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises." We got earnestness in there, the opposite of apathy, the opposite of sluggishness. And he says, so that you will not be sluggish, but be imitators of those who inherit the promises. If I am sluggish, I will not be among those who inherit the promises. That's the implication. To be sluggish, which again is the main side effect of apathy, is to put yourself in danger of being lost eternally. There are some scriptural antonyms for apathy, though. We already looked at one of them. Diligent. Be diligent. Paul used that word on a few occasions. Give diligence to show yourself approved. Be diligent. That word translated diligent means to be especially conscientious in discharging an obligation. I'm especially conscientious. I'm going to make sure make every effort, and take pains, be zealous to do this thing. It's not what the one-talent servant did in the parable. His conscience did not move him enough. Make every effort to do one's best is what that word means. And zealous is the other one. Zeal is the opposite of apathy. Zeal, to be positively and intensely interested in something. I bet you have something in your life that you are positively and intensely interested in. We all do. I do. I have a few. Multiple things. I bet you do too. That's what zealous means. It's zeal. You are enthusiastic about that. You are passionate about that. If somebody brings that subject up, you're going to be in there. I want to talk about this thing because I am interested in this thing. I'm passionate about it. I'm knowledgeable in it. I know it and I love it. Why can't Christ be one of those things? Why can't the church be one of those things? Be zealous. Another Greek scholar defined it as to desire earnestly or pursue, to strive after, to busy oneself about. Because you're interested in it. You're passionate about it. Not indifferent. Just like we have things we're passionate about, we have things that we're apathetic about, we're indifferent about. All of us do. But don't let the church be one of those things that goes under the list of things that I'm indifferent about. Because it is not only disgraceful, it's not only destructive, but it's ultimately destructive. It's absolutely a damning offense, according to the Lord, in both of these places, in addition to what the Hebrews writer implied. Well, what about us? You know, the first century church was not without problems. It had plenty of problems. Revelation 2 and 3 is proof of that. 1 Corinthians deals with some of those problems. But as a rule, notwithstanding the church at Laodicea, as a rule, apathy was not one of them. Not one of their problems. As a rule, it was hard to be an apathetic Christian in the first century because just by becoming one, you could be forfeiting your life. Even if you never spoke of the Lord again, just becoming a Christian could have been your death sentence. So as a rule, in the first century, apathy wasn't one of the problems that they regularly dealt with. But 2,000 years later, it's a different story, I'm afraid. A totally different story. Apathy is absolutely killing the 21st century church from the inside out. All the warnings, all the admonitions of that nature, of its destruction, destructive power of apathy and indifference. And here we are. And it's killing the 21st century church. What is killing us? Apathy. It's at the bottom of it. It's at the root. Indifference. Can't be moved. Can't be bothered. There's no room in my life for the Lord and His church. It's killing the church from the inside out. The good news is, you can stop it. You can stop it. The way to kill the church's apathy is to put an end to your own apathy, because we are the church. That's one step. I can't change everybody else's, with a magic wand, but if I'll put an end to my own, somebody else that's struggling with apathy may put away theirs. I can encourage them. On the other hand, if I continue to be apathetic, if I continue to be indifferent, somebody who's not indifferent might end up being indifferent. And that's the domino effect that we have seen unfold over the last several decades. The way to cure the church of apathy is to put an end to your own. So what about you? Is apathy hampering your spiritual growth? Maybe it hasn't always been that way, but it is recently. Pray. Ask for help. Talk to a brother or sister. Do something. Remember the warning of the Lord. Because you are lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth. But also remember that he gave the cure 3 verses later. Be zealous and repent. And that's the call for us today. If I struggle with apathy, if I'm indifferent, if my actions and my life shows that I'm indifferent to the church, and the symptoms are very plain and clear to everyone, I need to put an end to that. I need to stop it. Indifference. Can't sit on the fence. If I sit on the fence, I'm on the wrong side by default, according to Jesus. With me or against me, no middle ground.